A Jacksonville advocacy organization for people with intellectual disabilities celebrates a new facility, one created especially for those with additional mental health issues. I'm joined now by the ARC Jacksonville president and CEO, Kari Bates. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Bernadette Moran, member of the ARC Jacksonville board and mom of an ARC client. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And if you have questions about opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities, you can reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or X. You can also call us at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Bernadette, your daughter Moira isn't here today, but tell us a little bit about her. How old is she? What's she like?
She's wonderful. Maura's 36 years old, and she has Down syndrome. We were in New York for the first 5 years of her life, and she had wonderful therapy, and then moved back. Jacksonville is my home. Moved back here for family, but I've watched Jacksonville grow in its services for those with disabilities. Till today, I would say it's a wonderful place if you have a child. There are very many services, and what the ARC is doing now is it's a cutting edge on serving people with developmental disabilities.
And you've been a big part of bringing Jacksonville along in terms of your advocacy, your involvement, your own fundraising on some of these projects.
Yes, it's been a pleasure to do, because I think people, as they see what can be done and the wonderful progress that our folks are making, they're very happy to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. And Maura, how old was she when she was diagnosed? Was it something right from birth?
Diagnosis is right at birth.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of challenges has that presented?
Well, finding services has always been, part of that. Now that she's 36, it's employment that is really difficult to access. So that is a big challenge. But as we were going through, the same thing for most parents is education. But for a child with a disability, it's almost every year. You don't find a school and say, oh, this will be through 8th grade. You say every year, well, that's working for this year. What about next year? And that is a huge challenge, and why I think that it's necessary that there are a variety of services available for them, because just like anyone, you need choices. They grow, they change, their needs change as they grow. And we found now with the village and also with the lodge that's coming up that they need sometimes different services, because they have now reached a level, an age for independence. And that's the challenge now, and always beating that and making sure she's equipped to be able to handle it.
And Kari Bates, tell us now, we're talking about a couple of different facilities. They're both run by the ARC Jacksonville. The ARC is part of a national organization, but it's the local affiliate or local branch. But there is an existing facility, until very recently. It's been around for several years. I think you said it opened in 2016?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is called the Village.
Correct.
And then this new facility that just opened is called the Lodge.
Yes.
Explain to us the difference between those two facilities and what populations they serve.
So the Village came online about 8 years ago, and it serves 121 people who want to live independently, but maybe need a little support, or they really are looking for socialization that you wouldn't get in the greater community. So I always say, just like many of us move into neighborhoods with people like us, whether you're raising young kids, whether you're 55 and up, whatever, it's kind of offers that for people with intellectual differences. So you can have your friends as neighbors, there's activities, and then there's support that really helps set the person up for success. So there's grocery shuttles, there's staff available on site. So if there is some sort of roommate conflict, there's a staff there that can help. So really the goal of the Village is to help people live as independently as possible. And it's an amazing, amazing place to live. It's one of the first in the country. We host people probably monthly from across the country who want to come and duplicate it, really because of the success. And the wait list is certainly a testament to that. It's been full. Most of the people moved in when it opened, and most of them are still there. So because of that, there is kind of a little bit of a pent-up demand. But one thing we learned through the Village is that oftentimes people that we support can very easily live alone. They have the skills to, take care of themselves, but they may face anxiety or depression or other mental health related issues that really make independent living more of a challenge. Even roommate conflict, for example. And so through that, we started to really look at what are the mental health needs of the people we serve and how can we better meet those needs so that independence is achievable. And that's kind of the idea that the lodge was born out of, is really offering independence. The actual physical design of the space is set up to maximize independence, but then also having mental health supports kind of pushed in and out, all of the staff there having a little extra training so that they can day in and day out get consistent support to really set them up for success, always with the goal of independence, both the village and the lodge. One big difference is the lodge does have around the clock awake staff, so if there is a crisis, someone is there. Also can help with medication support. The village is really much like any apartment community you'd see in the neighborhood. If you drove in there today, you would not be able to tell the difference between it and any other apartment. There are some things embedded in it that make it unique, but you wouldn't actually notice a difference.
And so the lodge serves this population that has, and like in any population, people have mental health issues, and that's true within the community of people with intellectual differences. But I'm not sure. I mean, this is kind of an emerging understanding that we're all having. So people may not understand the difference between an intellectual disability or difference and a mental health issue. Can you kind of explain?
Yes, and yes, people with intellectual differences have a mental health, a likelihood of developing a mental health diagnosis, just like the rest of us. Perhaps even more so. We know that about a third of the people we support have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And this is emerging not because it's new, but really because I think for most of the people we support, any challenge they faced was almost always attributed to their disability. So like Maura, most of the people we support were diagnosed at or near birth. And there is a intellectual delay that comes with that, which may make their coping with different situations more unique than how you or I would cope with it. I'm learning to deal with conflict is different. So I think oftentimes when anxiety or depression presented itself, all of us kind of attributed that to the disability, not thinking, oh, this is a mental health diagnosis that we can treat and really make an impact on to help the person get set up for success. So the disability itself is something they're born with. The mental health diagnosis is something we know there's proven ways that we can improve their life through treating and supporting them or helping them learn to cope with their diagnosis.
We're talking about a new facility that's open to help people with mental health illnesses and intellectual differences. And if you want to join the conversation or you have a family member that is in that circumstance, you can call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. Bernadette, when Maura was young, you said she was diagnosed early with Down syndrome, which is not unusual. But at some point, did you start to notice that there were some coexisting mental health issues, or was that difficult, as Kari says, to kind of discern?
Quite honestly, it really became evident as she moved out on her own. The ARC has a program where we have individuals who go to college at the University of North Florida, and Maura went to that program and also lived in the student housing. And it was then that I began to see, because I think she began to see her own deficits. And then she was also learning our kids don't have the same ability or opportunity to socialize. Like I'm sure you had a good friend somewhere that you spent the night at their house and you spent all night talking and getting along and whatever. Our kids don't generally have that kind of opportunity because they're not so independent that they get out there. Well, all of a sudden she was faced with that, with other girls who were living. It was four girls living in a 4-bedroom apartment. And I began to see then her problems. And I began to also see that she had depression that was coming about because she had always been, she's very smart, my daughter. She had always been able to do many, if not everything. And suddenly she was faced with not being able to do that, not being able to handle that kind of the level of independence. And so it really kind of started when she went out on her own, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And those differences that she was perceiving may have exacerbated some existing anxieties that she had.
Exactly.
And so how long did it take to kind of figure out that that was happening, and not, as Kari says, kind of attribute issues to, her developmental differences?
I think I saw that immediately because I was so familiar with her, having lived at home with her for all of that time, that nuances of change I could begin to see, when she would come home. And plus, I've always been fortunate that I have a group of people, friends, as well as individuals that I've met through the ARC that have given me a basis of understanding. And I think that's critical to any parent to be involved in an organization, because you do have the advantage of the thinking of all of the other parents that are involved in that organization, and it's very helpful. So I think I saw that pretty clearly as it came on, and I know we began seeing a counselor to giving her a place to go and talk about the things that were bothering her that she was doing or not doing, and also with a friendship. That's another thing that's really hard. We all don't realize how hard it is to make a friend, and then once you have one, how do you keep it? How do you have that kind of relationship that builds? So that also was a very difficult part for her, and still remains so.
When you were looking for a counselor, was it somebody that had experience providing counsel to someone with an intellectual difference, or do you just go to kind of a regular counselor and hope that they can interpret and understand?
The latter, but not by choice. I would really want to go to someone who had experience, but I'm going back now, probably 10 years, more than 10 years. There are not counselors out there who have experience in dealing with developmental disabilities or differences. And so that makes them have to start from ground zero, and so it makes it harder. So I would love to have found someone that had experience, but unfortunately I didn't, and found people that were willing to learn, to read, to study, to understand better the nuances.
Interesting. Is that still a need in the community that
Oh,
you see?
very much so.
Mhm.
Very much so, yes.
Is that something that the ARC is in any way looking at or working on in terms of trying to connect families to people, counselors who might have that background?
Yes, and along those lines, one thing we really have started in the last 10 years is taking the student interns through different mental health programs. So hopefully part of our kind of advocacy work
And the
is
student interns explain that those are the students at UNF.
UNF or any other university, if they're pursuing a degree in mental health or trying to become a licensed mental health counselor, they can do part of their clinical experience with us, so that down the road, hopefully, there'll be more people practicing that do have some experience and exposure to people with intellectual differences. It's kind of twofold. It allows us to really meet the needs of the people we support in a really affordable way through partnerships with the universities, because many of the people we support are underinsured, or Medicaid is their primary insurance. But also it really does, we're hopefully kind of pumping out a cohort of future professionals that have had this experience in life. And so that if someone like Moira walks into their office a few years from now, they've had that experience and can be better practitioners.
So the lodge is a relatively small facility. Talk about its design and how it's meant to support people who have some mental health issues, not just with staffing, but kind of how it's built. And also, it isn't huge, right?
Right. So it's six individual apartments. It's 5,500 square feet. It's really a very unique, and I would just say cool design, in that people can live independently. They get their own sitting room, their own kitchenette, to really get the dignity that comes with privacy. There's so much to be said for having your own space, obviously, but then there are still common spaces. So there's a big kitchen where staff can help prepare meals. There's a sitting area, people can socialize, but then plenty of space to kind of retreat to when people just need to be alone. So that's the physical design, I think, is a huge part of supporting this population. And it's 6 people, it's 24/7, it's staffed 1 to 2 people at all times, depending on who's there and what their needs are. And the goal is to help people gain the skills to live independently. And that could take years. It's not considered a short-term crisis program. It's really a preventative, early intervention, help someone develop the skills long-term. We do offer other mental health supports at our programs for people who aren't in this program. So we do a lot of what we call psychosocial rehabilitation, but it's almost a form of a group type therapy, because Bernadette and I were just talking before, really a huge benefit of that program is the daily supports. So a lot of people may see a counselor, every couple weeks or once a week, but you're not going to get that daily reinforcement, that daily feedback. And so the group model allows us to really, for our population specifically, make sure that they're getting the redirection, really problem solving in real time versus trying to reflect later, which can be hard for all of us. So that's a model we use both at the lodge, but then in other programs. So if someone lives at home or they live in another setting, we can still support their mental health needs through that program.
And you mentioned that this is kind of a preventative therapeutic approach. And I think all of us, unfortunately, have seen headlines where people with an intellectual disability have gotten into trouble with law enforcement because of a misunderstanding. So, what is it about a facility like this in terms of its preventative role that can help with that?
So it's twofold. Again, it helps the person themselves, the person we're supporting, really gain the skills they need to cope with just the challenges we all face. But then there is always an outreach type part to it, where we do try to partner with our local law enforcement, community partners, and do kind of two-sided training of what we know, what they know, so that whenever we have an interaction in the community, that people can know how to respond appropriately. And I would say, I think in Jacksonville, we're pretty fortunate. We do from time to time, for different reasons, sometimes unrelated to us, have interactions with law enforcement. And they are very aware of our work. They're very supportive and I think willing to learn. So I think we've made a lot of progress in that area, but certainly this is a way to continue that conversation and really opens up more doors for people to ask more questions and understand really the difference.
And so, Bernadette, your daughter is currently kind of in a wait list posture for the lodge. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so, what is your understanding of how long that might take? And why is it that seems like a suitable move for her at this point?
Well, I have no idea how long it'll take since the lodge has just opened, so we don't know how long each individual will be there, and I don't know how far I am on the list to to move in, so I don't have an estimate on that. But I think, as Kari mentioned, that consistency is there for counseling, which I think would be very important for her. She lives in her own apartment now, her own one bedroom. So you don't see as much of her, and you don't see as much the issues that she's facing when she's in her apartment, and she does isolate herself to a great extent. So I hope that the people at the lodge will provide that kind of consistency, and they will see the nuances of her. As we said, with counselors, frequently they don't understand a developmental difference, but the people who will be at the lodge will be tutored in that, and I think will be very effective in understanding and helping her cope with some of the things that prevent her success in a social environment.
We have an email I want you to kind of respond to. Jason, he says, "Good morning. I have a 13-year-old son with pretty significant intellectual and development disabilities. He has a chromosome deletion, is nonverbal, and needs assistance with basic life skills. He will never be able to live independently. Is there a waiting list for facilities?" And then he continues, "It's heartbreaking to know that he will eventually need care outside our home, and we put off looking into options. We don't want to face the reality, even though often the child or young adult may be better served consistently by caregivers."
Yes. So, what I would say to anyone, especially if you have a child in the age that Jason's talking about, is we have an advocacy department that is available to really have some of those conversations. There are a lot of things that you want to be doing early on because there are a lot of wait lists. That's not to say that it is an endless game, but there are definitely some things you want to get lined up. Many of our residential organizations, ours, others in the community, operate really in contract with the state of Florida through the Agency of Persons with Disabilities. That itself has a wait list to get services through the state. But the sooner you start that, the better. And there are things the people on our advocacy team can really help families understand what matters as far as getting someone off the wait list. Things you want to be documenting, things you want to have records of to show that the person's going to be in need and that it is to their benefit, and really they will achieve more if they receive the services. So I encourage people to reach out to our advocacy department. We're one of the only in the state of Florida that really offers that support to families and really directs people where to go. So I always tell people, if you take nothing else, just know if there's someone in your community, in your church, and you know they need help now or are going to need help in the future, to set up time to talk to someone on our advocacy team to really start that process. And that a lot of times kind of drives the conversation. From there becomes, what are the person's needs? There's all sorts of different homes. We operate outside of the ones we're talking about, 5 other homes that really have their own unique culture and vibe depending on what the person's personality is, what their needs are, what their goals are. And so that really becomes a matter of when the adult is ready to go out on their own, what do they need and how can we help them be successful? But certainly just the advocacy department, there's so much out there that parents none of us, I mean, I've worked in this field now for almost 10 years, and it's a hard system to navigate. So no one should be expected to do that on their own.
And so even if somebody hasn't kind of registered with the state of Florida for services, they could use your advocacy. And how do they contact someone with that part of your?
So through our website, there's a whole site on advocacy and family supports, and yes, they will help kind of point people in the right direction. And then if they need more support, there's services we offer beyond that. We have case management services that are available. We just started a new guardianship program for people that a lot of times for families we're more of a backup guardian for family members. But there's just all sorts of things because it never, when you have an adult child with a disability, that's not the end. I think Bernadette can attest to that. Really, the planning for the next phase never ends. And so really it takes you through that whole lifespan. And that's something I think kind of unique to our team is that we are kind of constantly looking at the lifespan.
I should add that Jason added in his email. Thank you for the work that you do assisting our most vulnerable. But Bernadette, talk a little bit about, what is your reaction to an email like that from someone like Jason? That's obviously a very difficult position for a parent who is dreading the thought of their child having to not be at home.
Well, certainly I always feel bad for a parent, and I sit back and say I'm very fortunate with my daughter. For one thing, her physical health has always been very good, and he's dealing with not only emotional and developmental, but it's also physical disabilities. So for him, it's very difficult. The good thing is, as Kari mentioned, is the advocacy department, and it has guided me really for 20 years. Has guided me in what I'm doing in the services and knowing everything that's out there, because that is so hard to find out what services exist in the community that you can turn to. And that is something that the advocacy department is good at doing and helping you to understand. And maybe it's even blending, different agencies, to come together to make a better life. It's not, one solution. So really dealing with people who know what they're doing and who are compassionate to you is critical.
And how are you able to plan for the future? I know you said that your daughter has gone through many kind of stages, evolving needs already. How do you look toward her, midlife and her later life and try to work to anticipate what that might look like?
It's hard. It's very hard. But one of the things that it's probably a couple years old again at the ARC, which I have to keep coming back to since I'm so familiar, but they have started a life path program in which you can work to write down what you want for your child for the future, what you think it will take monetarily, what will it take to do that. And the ARC also has a pooled trust that allows you to begin saving for your child and not having that go against that $2,000 threshold that is there for Social Security and Medicaid services. So there's a place to save the money, and then there's a person to help you to figure out how much do you think you need to do, and what do you need to do also in terms of guardianship or trustees or whatever it is that you need. They can help you to understand that and guide your thinking. And that has been, again, very helpful to me because it is a constant worry. And I'll tell you what's happening now is not just parents coming in, but parents who have passed away and their siblings now are coming in saying, OMG, I've just gotten responsibility for my sister and I haven't lived with her for 20 years. I don't know what she's capable. I don't know what to do. And that is a situation you don't want to fall into. You want to make sure that you have informed families, your family members, and that you have something in place to guide them.
And Kari, how important is kind of bringing family members along? I mean, I would imagine that they're under sometimes, as we heard from Jason, some very difficult circumstances, very, very stressful. I can imagine. So what, if any, resources are you able to direct parents to who are, kind of coping with various challenges like this?
Yes, I think that is significant. Oftentimes, and that's why we actually kind of call our advocacy department the Advocacy and Family Support Department, because they are going through oftentimes just their own journey and their own trauma. And one thing I know, one of the licensed mental health counselors we're partnering with on the lodge, we're really starting to talk about some sort of family therapy type family support to to support people as they kind of go through each stage. But many of our staff, whether it be in our transition program when someone's transitioning out of high school to college, or now in our aging program that's helping people who are aging, really spend a good bit of their time talking to the family, educating the family, helping them to understand what's going on, and then pairing people up just like we all benefit. Bernadette talked about having friends that you lean on, having some organic partnerships and relationships evolve for families so they can get to know each other and really understand someone who maybe has gone through something before them, and what they learned is, I think, critical for all of us.
So we've talked about this new facility, the Lodge, for people who've got some mental health issues. There's the Village, which is an apartment complex for people with intellectual differences. And then there's these group homes. There's about 5 of them. Is that right, around Jacksonville?
Yes.
What need is there overall? What kind of waiting list is there overall for these facilities?
So the need, honestly, the need's pretty staggering if you look at the numbers of people in our community and the state. Really, we probably support around 20 to 30% of the people who have some need. Most of our programs, our partners, our peers, most of our programs are all running kind of at or near capacity. The problem is that we face is that everyone really has really unique needs. So we're constantly trying to ask, what is, a need that we can meet in the community? And right now we're talking a lot about aging. We're talking a lot about autism, and developing more programs. But there's almost an endless need. There's so much. We just had a meeting last week, and one of the board members said there's so much to be done. And there really is so much to be done, and so many people that need our support. And finding ways to do that as efficiently and effectively as possible is kind of the challenge that the ARC gladly accepts.
Mm-hmm. And Bernadette, just kind of final thoughts about things that, either your experience has taught you or your work with the ARC has taught you that you think the community would benefit from hearing.
Involvement in a community like the ARC, whether it's the ARC or another one, but I think it's so advantageous to be involved in that organization because you learn so much. They are out talking with our legislators and advocating for services, and if they don't know from families what's important and what families are needing and driving, then you don't get that kind of change. And so I can't say enough the importance of being involved in an organization that serves individuals. And whether it be, cerebral palsy has an organization in town, spina bifida has an organization. There's, different places that you can go for the particular disability of your child, but most important to do that.
Well, Bernadette Moran, Kari Bates, thank you both so much for being here. I appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Thank you very much for having us.
All right.